All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today for our Q&A, our Medical Advisory Board Educational Series. I am Deanna Bryan, and I'm the Program Manager at Hope for HIE. And today I am joined by the amazing Dr. Melisa Carrasco McCaul, and she is a Pediatric Neurologist, Director of the Trees Lab at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, Assistant Professor and Director of the Neonatal Neurocritical Care and Rehabilitation at the University of Wisconsin. And there's just a long list of credentials. And today we're going to be talking about the relationship between perinatal brain injuries and understanding the long-term cognitive impacts or on cognitive development that could happen consequently. So thank you so much for being here with us today.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
You have been so amazing throughout this process already, and I'm so excited for you to kind of share what's going on in this research landscape. I know that you have some personal work that your team is doing as well, so we're going to get into that. But before we do, I would love if you could just kind of start by introducing yourself and give us a brief career overview, and answer what led you to have an interest in the long-term impacts of early brain injuries on cognitive development.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. So great question. Let's see, where to begin? Whenever you want to tell your origin story, it's like, oh, how do you go? How far
back do you go?
Growing up, I was the oldest sibling. I just knew for the longest time that I wanted to work with kids and do pediatrics, and I just wasn't sure what my focus was going to be. I did my undergrad at Yale, and I thought I was going to be straight up just, pre-med into becoming a physician, et cetera. But I had a very early experience with a female scientist who was just a badass. She was amazing. And she really made me fall in love with the idea of research and how it can really inform medicine, how we just get to learn from each other and do this team-based approach to issues and questions from a scientific perspective. And from there, at some point, as a medical student, I found an interest in neuroscience. For the longest time, I worked with kids with autism, looking at executive function development. And eventually, I just found Pete's Neurology, or Pete's Neurology found me. I don't know which one it was. And I eventually started working with kids with HIE. So that's been the journey. I must say, you come in for one thing and then you really stay for another. I came in for this because of the science and the scientific questions. But what really has made me stay has been the patients and the families. You really get to connect with these kids from when they're itty bitty and they have just arrived. And it's just so fulfilling to see them grow up and become their own person. And just to be a part of that journey it's humbling, very much so. And it's awesome. So it's really fun. That's kind of how I got here. Yeah.
Yeah. And now, we benefit, obviously, because I know you're doing so much work, and we'll get into it. But we're so grateful for you to be here. And just as an advocacy organization, we are all about empowering and equipping our parents with knowledge. So we're grateful for your time and for all of the information that you're going to give us today. So before we start getting into that research landscape, I know that you're the director of the Trees Lab. For those of our community members who don't know what it is, do you mind giving us an overview of the lab and its primary research focus?
Yes, absolutely. So the Trees Lab, it's an acronym for a very long thing that I won't go over, but we are looking for early signs and markers of both cognitive issues, learning issues, and long-term development of what we call executive functions in kids that have had an early injury such as HIE. We know that these kids have a lot of potential, and we want to make sure that we are figuring out what is it that they could benefit the most from in terms of rehabilitation long-term. We're also understanding that the sooner you recognize issues or concerns, the better. I feel like the people that have worked on the motor end of things, figuring out how early can we diagnose cerebral palsy, how early can we diagnose motor issues, the better, because then you rehabilitate these kids earlier and it just benefits them so much more. There's this period where you feel like things are more plastic, and if you do rehab then as opposed to waiting, they just get so much more benefit from it. So for the longest time, I've been an advocate of I feel like that's also the case for learning abilities and cognition. The sooner you promote these skills, the better, because little kids are sponges. They like learn so much, they absorb from the world around them. They're so motivated. They are so interested in like mimicking others, following others, and like learning from others. Like the whole world is just this like bright, new, exciting thing. This is when we should be trying to rehabilitate some of these issues. And the reasons are obvious, like they lead to greater independence, they lead to greater school like competence and readiness. They lead to feeling more like not only that independence, but feeling more like self-assured and confident as they navigate school. And we all know that school is not just going in and learning, it's like learning to like become part of a community, adapting and all that stuff. And these skills can all help kind of bolster all of that. So the sooner we are part of that journey, the better. But how early should we be doing? We still don't know. How can we even like predict some of these issues? Like we still don't know. And that's what the lab is trying to do. And the way we do it is through play. So a lot of people look at what I do and they're like, you just get paid to play with kids all day. But honestly, the way kids learn is by playing. So I'm trying to just take a step back and be like, okay, how is playing promoting learning? How is playing promoting language development? How is play promoting like your self-image and understanding your relationship with the world? So that's kind of what we do. And then we get to play with the kids. So it's pretty awesome. That's pretty much what we do.
The gamification of learning is huge, and it is truly beneficial. So it's awesome that you're inserting that into your kind of like methodology, if you will.
Yes.
So I know that you're overseeing something called the Sprint study, but before we get into that, do you mind highlighting some of the key findings and achievements from the Trees Lab other research efforts? I know that you said there was a biomarker study and there were brain markers, and research focused on brain markers and optimized language development. If you could review those, and then we'll get into the Sprint.
Absolutely. So we have at the University of Wisconsin an in-person study at the Trees Lab where we have been recruiting kids that had a history of HIE or other early neurological histories. And I can go over the list at some point, but for our purposes, HIE. And we also recruit healthy participants from the community. And the goal is to understand, okay, if you're born and you're diagnosed with HIE, does that early brain MRI that we collect in the hospital, can that help us predict learning abilities and development of executive functions long term? And I apologize, I've said the term executive functions and I haven't defined it. Executive functions are those basic skills that we need to develop from the moment we're essentially born. There's research to suggest that we're developing as early as age of life, 16 days age of life. So this is important. These are the skills that are allowed us to like look at the world, pay attention to things. Attention is a big one. Learn from the environment, learn to react to the environment, and learn to also self-regulate your emotions so that you're able to keep those in check and be able to just take in more information. I think about it as kind of like the brake system in our brains that helps us say, okay, hold up, let's pay attention to what's happening so I can learn from it, keep myself safe, but also just keep that learning going. So that's what we do. So we're looking at early MRIs and seeing how that affects executive function development and learning. The way we do this is we have kids come in at ages 6, 9, and 18 months of age. So we already have their brain MRIs from back in the day. We do fun tasks and we observe them play using like a very specific assessment. And we try to say, okay, can this MRI predict how these kids are doing, except in terms of these abilities, in terms of their like playing at 6, 9, and 18 months of age? And does that predict how they're going to do long term in school? So we're slowly acquiring that early phase 1 data where we're looking at MRIs and how they predict these abilities at ages 6, 9, and 18 months. The preliminary data in my lab is really interesting. It goes to show two things. One of them is not surprising. The first result we've gotten was that in kids with more global injuries, when they first get diagnosed with HIE, so with more severe injuries, they really struggle with executive function and learning abilities, even as early as 6 months. So they're already kind of like set back. There's like a delay that we hope that we can learn a little bit more about so we can help rehabilitate over time. So that's result number 1. Result number 2, which was surprising, and again, this is preliminary data, is that even with kids who do not have severe injuries, if they have injuries to their white matter, so the brain is composed to gray and white matter, that can also set them back in terms of like executive function skills. This is very important because what we know about cooling, about therapeutic hypothermia and cooling, is that cooling is really great at helping protect your gray matter. It's not as good at protecting your white matter. So even though we've done great cooling therapy, changed everything, right? It's literally the best thing. Probably, I shouldn't say that. I'm sorry. I'm a neonatal neurologist. So I'm like, it's not the great. It's one up there, one of the greatest interventions that we've come up with in the last 20 years. But it has its limitations. It's really good at that gray matter, especially if you're in the mild and moderate end of HIE. But it's still not perfect at protecting that white matter. Even when like a brain MRI looks like there's no injury, at the microscopic level there are still changes. So the fact that we're seeing these issues arise secondary to white matter injury makes us push more for like, okay, maybe therapeutic hypothermia is not enough. We should be thinking about other adjunct therapies to help support that and do more to protect that white matter. This is all very preliminary, of course, and that's what we're actively recruiting. And this is one of those things that we are in no rush. We want to get good data. We're going to be collecting this data for years because we want to get to a good number of like participants so that when I go back and tell our families, like, this is what we found, I want us to be able to say, this is good data. This is data that's not just applicable to us, but generalizable across the population. So it's going to be quite a hands-on deck effort for several years. I suspect so. Little by little, that's what we're finding.
Yeah, I mean, and progress is progress, right? I mean, because you talk about cooling. I know enough to know that a cooling or therapeutic hypothermia is not just readily available, depending on where you live and depending on the outcome of or the range of HIE that you're diagnosed with at birth. And then, I mean, and when we talk about low-income countries, that's not also a thing. So it's amazing that we're spending time and energy and money and research and all these things on finding something, like you said, that we can do that's supplementary or adjunct to that cooling to make it more widely available. So that's amazing.
Yeah, that's so important. I agree. Yeah.
So we know this is something that our community is familiar with, but there are just gaps in research. That's, I mean, if I had a nickel for every time we said gaps in research, I would be in Bora Bora. So
that's awesome.
So what are the current gaps in research regarding the cognitive development in children with HIE and other perinatal brain injuries? And then if you don't already mention it kind of in your answer, if you could, what are those gaps and then what contribute to those gaps?
Yeah, so there's so many gaps. I mean, but the biggest one that I can think of is there's really good, just because therapeutic hypothermia is so new, we have a lot of data on cognitive outcomes long term, like I'm talking going into adulthood, pre-cooling for children that were diagnosed with HIE pre-cooling and have been followed ever since. So we have like good long-term learning ability data for those kids, where it's very limited for kids post-cooling, just because it's just such a new therapy. So we really don't know long-term how these kids, as they grow into teenagers and adults, how they're doing from a learning perspective, from a cognitive perspective, and that's a big gap. What can we do to address this? If we could like get on the phone with somebody, like fund more of this research. Like funding is always like a big thing that we can, I mean, Hope for HIE does so much to advocate and get the word in and all that stuff. But I mean, as scientists and physicians, we should be doing also more to get the word out there, to get more funding available. That's one way to like promote research, get more data collected, inform decisions a little bit better. I think also like one of the things that we can all try to do from my end of things is just trying to get more people interested in researching like child development. I think for some people, like it's just something that they don't even know is a career choice when they go into medicine, when they go into research. A lot of funding, if you look at the way funding is broken down, most of it goes into more adult related things than pediatrics. So getting the word out that this is like a really cool career choice, I think that would be really helpful. And then the last thing, and I always talk about this, like recruitment is just so hard. So trying to, as like research groups connect with one another to try to promote each other's research and promote recruitment. Like the families are interested. Every family I talk to about research, they want to do it. They want to help. They want to be involved, but they don't even know how. So trying to do a better job at connecting what we do, recruiting people, and like, you know, it's just, I'm so grateful for people's time when like they're willing to do like our research studies. They're longitudinal studies, so they entail multiple visits, but that's how we really get to learn about child development well over time. Trying to do a better job at recruiting, I think, is so important. And trying to make sure that the research that we do, that the research questions that we ask, like makes sense to the patients we want to serve and that they're important to them. Because I think that for the longest time, there was a disconnect between what maybe the scientific community thought was important. And then you suddenly ask a family, like a parent, and they're like, who cares? Like, you know, trying to make the connection. It's just so important. Yeah.
Yeah. I know there's been this amazing trend of more patient family input. And that's something that, you know, Hope has been very actively involved with. And I know that I, you know, make jokes about gaps in research, but the reality is, you know, if it weren't for those gaps, then we wouldn't have researchers and people like you putting in all of that work, and working with all these families to find answers and find potential solutions. So, it's amazing what's happening. Yeah. Now, I guess if we're going to look from a more glass half full perspective, you know, we've talked about what we don't know. What do we know? What do we know about this relationship between brain injury, perinatal brain injury, and long-term cognitive impacts, if we know anything?
Absolutely. We do know that, I think, so when a child is born and is diagnosed with HIE, I think we all know that there's mild, moderate, and severe HIE. I think most of us from the medical world feel very comfortable telling the family what to expect, guiding them through that process when the child is in one of both extremes, the mild HIE or the severe HIE. Moderate HIE remains such a mystery. We're still trying to figure out how to best counsel our families, but I do draw a lot of like, I don't know, it feels good to be able to say, okay, your child ends in one of these two ends of the spectrum. This is exactly what your child needs. This is how we're going to lead, you know, rehabilitate, go from there. This is how we're going to support you as a family through this, and optimize things for your child in an effort to try to have him have the most independent life possible. So I think we do know a lot about both ends of the spectrum. It's the middle that we're still trying to figure out a little bit more. The other thing that we know really well to do, and this is something that, because I trained in neurology, I'm especially proud of, as we know with HIE, a very common comorbidity is neonatal seizures. And I think we're doing a really good job. There's always room for improvement. With everything, there's room for improvement. But I think we're really getting good at recognizing seizures, getting, if you have the tools available, getting that AEG or that EEG on as soon as possible, treating. This is something that when I started training, we didn't really even talk about that much, to like, oh, this kid really still acting very encephalopathic. Should we hook up to EEG? I don't know. Like, I feel like we know that kids, when they have HIE and then there's neonatal seizures on top of it, that can really affect recovery so much more. It's an extra hurdle that they need, that, you know, the patient needs to get through. I think we're doing a better job at recognizing. So that has been awesome. I think again, always room for improvement, always room to come up with better therapies. But fortunately, I think we're in a good place for that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I know back in April, we interviewed so many smart people about building a community culture of research. And one of the studies that I remember talking about, one of the research studies showed really interesting results where they put an EEG on a child who hadn't shown any signs, like physical presentations of seizures, but they were happening. And, you know, so even things like that, like the information like that can just really change the trajectory of treatment. So yeah, just small steps, like you said.
Yeah.
We're all ready to talk about the SPRINT study. If you could provide, you know, I say it, but people may not know what it is. So the overview of it, its key questions and objectives, inclusion criteria, and then any study details you can think of, like enrollment or access to study via telehealth, which I know is something that you guys prioritize as well.
Yeah, I'm very excited about the sprint study. So basically, up till now, I've been talking about the research we do in our actual physical lab.
Mm-hmm.
Getting to the lab for families is very hard. Families are busy, especially when you have a child that you have to also be like, going with her or him to like doctor's appointments, therapy visits, all that stuff. It's really hard for you to carve out time. Even though families really want to be involved in the research, it's hard to carve out the time to drive in. Where I live in Wisconsin, a lot of our patient population drives more than 2 to 3 hours to get to us anyway. So traveling to our lab to physically participate in a study is very hard. In an effort to promote recruitment and engagement and to collect more data, to just start answering some of these questions we had, I said, are there aspects of our in-person study that we could do virtually? And there definitely are. So we have kind of pivoted a little bit, and we are recruiting right now families with a child with HIE, and also families with a child born extremely premature, so born less than 28 weeks gestational age, as well as healthy kids that do not have these neurological histories. And we're meeting them online. It's really fun. It's a Zoom visit. We log in, they log in. We do some of the tasks that we would have done in person. We do them remotely. It's very fun. I don't have my puppet with me, but one of them is a puppet task. Sometimes it's here with me, and I kind of spook people when I bring out the puppet. So anyway, this is what I do.
I would have loved it.
I know. I feel bad that the puppet's not here, but anyway, it's like the cutest puppet. And then it's a puppy, and then like we just do like a couple different attentional things, and we're really getting a good understanding in a place that's home for the child. They're the most comfortable there. It's organic. It's like, I just think it's a really good way to get a window into development in like the place that you're most comfortable at, which is home.
Absolutely.
So that's worked out really well. We just finished the pilot phase of that this summer. We just wanted to get a sense of like, can we even do this? Like, is this even feasible? And it went really well. Whenever I start a new study, I kind of go like, how is this really going to work out? Once you start like, meeting the families, like, are they going to find this like strange? Like, but I don't know, I'm old, maybe. I'm like, virtual is the new way of doing things, right? So like, it's worked out really well. Families have been very receptive. Now that the feasibility, that phase 1 is done, we're taking a step back to look at the data we've collected and make sure that we are doing a good job at all of that stuff remotely. Remote is very new for us. But then we're going to start the study in earnest again later this year. So we're hoping to recruit 2,000 families for this over the
big cohort.
It's a big cohort over the span of like close to a decade. So we're going to be talking about the sprint study, I think, for a long time. I think it's important because whenever I do a research study in person, I always worry, am I just capturing what it's like to be a child growing up here in Wisconsin, or when I was at Michigan, like just here in Michigan? What my hope is that this will be a national cohort where the results are just, I can trust them, that they're generalizable, that I know that these apply to anybody everywhere. So that's going to be really fun. It's been really cool. Again, I'm a little bit on the older end. The idea of virtual research was just not even something that we talked about when I was training. And the fact that we're doing it, it feels very, I don't know, the Jetsons or something. Like we're like so futuristic, and it's been awesome. Yeah.
No, and obviously that's something that COVID kind of propelled us into, right? This familiarity with virtual learning. And so, like you said, a lot of that has to do with comfort and familiarity. And the reality is a lot of families and children are, very familiar with that setting.
Yeah.
So what are the specific aspects of cognitive development that are being evaluated in the sprint study?
The biggest one is attention. So being able to pay attention to something that's new so you can learn from it, being able to block off distractions, and being able to also pivot. So let's say I wake up this morning and I go make my coffee, and then I drink it and I move on. If I keep forgetting that I made my coffee, there's no way I'm going to be able to leave the house and do all the things I need to do. So being able to like say, this is done, it's time to move on. That's something that can be very hard. We know that it's very hard with kids across neurodevelopmental issues. Like kids with autism struggle with that ADHD. It's almost like things are too sticky, and sometimes it's hard to overcome and then move on to the next thing. I suspect this is an issue with kids that have HIE, but it's not something that we have like actually as a scientific community studied pretty closely. So that's one of the biggest things that we're looking at. So that ability to, again, pay attention, learn from something, move on to the next thing. That's the biggest thing we do. We are also looking at questionnaire data where parents tell us about their kids' executive function skills, their ability to plan, to self-regulate, to do different things, and just trying to learn from that information as well. Those are the biggest things. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. And we just had a parent who, and it's coincidentally our next question anyway, how do we get involved? How do we sign up for this virtual research project? We already have accrued interest. So
yes, this is awesome. Yeah. So there's like two main ways. We have an email address that I can share. If that's easier, I'll share that information before we end this. And then you can also go to our lab website, and there's a form there that you can use to sign up as well. But if you like, I can take this opportunity to share the email.
For sure.
I always talk about this. I myself are the mom with a toddler. So I feel like if I don't do things in the moment, I forget them. They don't get done. So
I feel very a connection with you when you said that. You're talking about ADHD and you're talking about like doing something and moving on, and I'm like, how much do I dump on this woman now? I'm like, this is me.
Yes, no, it's so
I get
true. I get it. When you're trying to balance so many things at the same time, it's hard to just focus on one and execute, right? And I feel like that's the case with like everybody, regardless of like a diagnosis, just being a human, like it's just really hard to juggle all these things. And I think with HIE, we're asking these kids to juggle a lot very early, but they're so resilient. I always talk to parents, I'm like, these kids are so sturdy. If this same thing happened to me and I had to do all this rehabilitation, PT, OT, speech, feeding, it would be just so much harder. I think that's actually something that's so cool about working with kids and like guiding them through this. It's like they have so much optimism. They have like so much motivation. They just want to be able to follow around their older sibling or the kids in the playground at daycare. So I don't know. It's a cool thing to study. It gives me a lot of energy to see that and be like, I can do this. Let's do this. Like, let's work on this together. Yeah.
I love it. Back to the email.
Sorry about that. If you let me keep talking, I keep talking about I go on tangents very easily. Sorry about that.
No, I mean, like the comedic, irony of that is just. I will not be editing that out. That will stay in perpetuity.
Excellent. I love it.
I can, if you give me the email, I can actually type it out for our banner.
I thought I did. Oh, I see.
Oh, did you?
I wrote it on the private chat. That was funny. Yeah. Do you see it?
Nope.
I'm sorry. sprint@neurology.wisc.edu. Here we go.
sprint@neurology.wisc.edu. Wisc.edu.
And Wisc is for Wisconsin. WISC. That's it. Thank you. Okay. Oh, this is so nice. I'm sorry. Again, I'm a little older. I'm like, all of these like technology things, the fact that you could post this live. Wow. Sorry.
It's a new platform that we're using, but I really much appreciate it.
I love it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll leave that up for families, and also we do key takeaways where we have. I'll put a link to the lab website. I'll include a link to this email, et cetera, et cetera. But while people maybe jot that in their notes or screenshot it, what do you anticipate the change in clinical care could be from the SPRINT study?
So I think till now, when families go in and see their neurologist or their medical team, there's a lot of talk about how to rehabilitate motor issues, how to help promote motor development. We don't have clear guidelines on how to promote the learning piece, other than you should read to your kid a lot. You should sing with your kid. I think we're really behind. So my hope would be that the SPRINT study will help provide that information for families and maybe pave the way towards a potential intervention in the future. Yeah.
I love that.
You don't know what you don't know, right? So there's no way for me to say I'm going to set out to like help rehabilitate learning development and cognitive development if I don't even know what to rehabilitate in the first place. I have ideas,
Right.
but that's what we need to learn, especially
Yeah.
now in the new era post therapeutic hypothermia. Yeah.
Yeah. But I do love, like you said, I do love that there are very there are things that parents and families can be like reading and singing to your child. I
Yeah.
mean, that's doable. You know, that's something we can add on to this long list of, you know, to our to-do list or our checklist for the day.
Yeah.
And as a former English teacher, I obviously, you know, very much promote that. So that's amazing.
There's beautiful research. Katie Husted here from Wisconsin has research on kids born, I think it actually was in kids that were eventually diagnosed with cerebral palsy. The more language you expose them to and the more words they have, like the better they will do long term. It's just try to like just throw as much language as you can, talk to them, sing to them, do as much of that. Sometimes you run out of things to talk to them about, right? Like it's hard. So just narrate the world around you, if that helps. I remember with my daughter, sometimes I'll be like, I don't know what to talk to you about. Let's talk about your diaper. We're going to do a diaper change. Let's talk about the color blue on the wall. Like, you know, but it's all language and it's all good for them. Yeah.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
So we always love to end our Q&As with just resources. So the first question we have for you is, how can families stay up to date on your research lab's past and current work?
Absolutely. So we have our research website. I can provide that as well. If you like, I'll share that in a minute. And then my hope would be that over time, it's like work is getting public. Obviously, if you become part of like our research group as a volunteer, we take steps that every 6 months we send a newsletter with, this is what we know. This is what we're doing thanks to you. So we do keep up to date on that. And that only goes to participants. So, and we don't divulge any like individual data. It's more like as a group, this is what we're learning. So that's the first thing. We have our lab website. So that's a nice way to know. And eventually, hopefully with like publications and stuff, that's another way to get the word out. I also try to state, getting to know Hope for HIE has been like amazing. So I try to like get the word out there as much as we can so that we're making this research like available to parents who can utilize it in their own lives. I come from a viewpoint where a lot of people say, oh, you're a scientist, you're not involved in health equity, you're not involved in like, how can you're a science, they just feel like it's such a separate thing. And I'm like, no, health equity and science go hand in hand. The way the research my lab puts out should be available to everybody for them to utilize. And if not, what am I doing? Right. Trying to get the word out there has been really important. I'm always open to suggestions though. But I think like talking to different groups, Hope for HIE, et cetera, like that's another way for us to get the word out there. Yeah. But there's also the website, if you want to Google us, Trees Lab Wisconsin. There's also like it's I should say there are, if you go into, if there's like a tree, if you get into like a Google search and there's like Trees of Wisconsin, you're in the wrong place. It's the Trees Lab. But Trees of Wisconsin, you can also learn from them so much. It's so cute.
I mean, if you need a hobby.
Yeah, their work is important too. They're saving the trees. So I love it. Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah.
And then just in terms of learning more just about cognitive development, its relationship to HIE and other perinatal brain injuries, where would you recommend parents go to accomplish that, learn more?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, Hope for HIE, like you have like all these like great talks and ways to meet experts. It's a good way to start learning more about these things. If your child eventually warrants a cerebral palsy diagnosis, there's a couple of foundations out there that do great work. You can just Google them and find out about their work. That's really good. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of like specific for HIE cognitive stuff or learning stuff. So that's a huge gap, going back to the gap. So my hope would be that by promoting this research and getting people excited about it, we'll have more and more groups tackling this sort of questions. And 20 years ago, the idea of like rehabilitation in autism was like nobody really knew anything about it. And you've seen how there was so much interest generated in the early 2000s. You go into Amazon, you type autism and executive functions or autism and learning, and you get like hundreds of books. So my
Yeah.
hope is that by beginning that movement and generating that interest, that's what we're going to see in like the next decade or so. I think we've done great work with the motor perspective of things and rehabilitation and that. And now you can find all this information readily available. I'm hoping we can do the same for learning and cognition. Yeah.
I love it. Thank you so much for joining us today. It has been such a pleasure to talk with you and get to learn more. Thanks for making me laugh along the way.
That's all I'm saying. And I've only had one coffee. Just wait till I have my second one.
I know. Well, I just again, I'm really mourning the puppet. I really wish that would have been just. Like
that's like the biggest. No, I'm kidding. That's one of the key takeaways. Like I should go nowhere without it.
Truly, it should just be in your back pocket. Lesson learned. To be more sincere, truly, we're so grateful for your time. It has been such a pleasure, and we're thankful for your work and your efforts, and we can't wait to see where this goes. We can't wait for families to be recruited and to accrue some interest, and hopefully we do, and hopefully we can schedule something down the road to see preliminary results or key findings or things that are interesting or what have you. So thanks again for your time.
Oh, I would love that. Thank you.
Yes. All right. And thanks everyone for joining us. I will be posting this on our YouTube channel, and then key takeaways and blog, etc. will be probably posted within the next week. So keep a lookout for that. Appreciate all of you joining, and until next time, bye everyone.
Thanks everyone. Bye.